I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's April 22nd, and we have a lot to talk about. Research shows that spirituality can benefit mental health and improve overall well-being, and it can play a meaningful role in helping people cope with life's challenges, like living with MS. Today, Dr. Mana Ali Carter joins me to discuss the positive effects that spirituality can have on the mind and body, and how it's been shown to make a difference for people living with MS. Dr. Ali Carter is a rehabilitation psychologist at MedStar National Rehabilitation Hospital in Washington, D.C., providing psychological assessments and psychotherapy to help people cope with disabilities and improve their quality of life. But before we get to my conversation with Dr. Ali Carter, there are a few other things that you should know about. A couple of weeks ago at the American Academy of Neurology's annual meeting, investigators shared findings from 2 phase 1 clinical trials for Kyverna's CAR-T therapy known as KYV-101, reporting that in the first 4 participants to be treated with KYV-101, the therapy was shown to be safe and well tolerated, and even showed preliminary signs of efficacy in people with primary progressive and secondary progressive MS. While currently being investigated for its effect on MS, CAR-T therapy is already used to treat several different cancers. In CAR-T therapy, blood is taken from the patient much as you would facilitate a blood donation. This blood is sent to a lab where the white blood cells, or T cells, are separated out and reprogrammed to carry a receptor designed to fight a particular condition. This receptor is known as a chimeric antigen receptor, or CAR, and over the course of several weeks in the lab, these fortified T cells multiply until there are millions of them. Then they're reintroduced to the patient through an intravenous infusion. In the case of KYV-101, this chimeric antigen receptor is designed to recognize a specific protein on the surface of B cells, called CD19. This protein is thought to be active in MS, and the CAR-T cells are formulated to target and eliminate these B cells. The theory behind this therapy is that a single treatment of KYV-101 will provide sustained control of their MS for people living with progressive MS. We've been following KYV-101 since this therapy received Fast Track designation from the FDA. And speaking of the FDA's Fast Track designation, I should also mention that Kyverna Therapeutics, the company behind KYV-101, has done some fast tracking of their own. They've developed a method for producing CAR-T cells in just 3 days instead of the several weeks it's traditionally taken for this process to be completed. This new process involves a simple blood draw and increases treatment accessibility while reducing costs, changes that should improve the patient experience and make this therapy a bit more budget-friendly. We'll continue to update you on KYV-101 as further progress is announced. Updates shared at the recent American Academy of Neurology conference indicated that Frexalimab, an experimental antibody treatment from Sanofi, performed well in an open-label extension of a phase 2 clinical trial. For adults with relapsing or active secondary progressive MS, the treatment was found to be safe and reduce signs of MS activity on MRIs, specifically active lesions and new or growing lesions. Data over 2 years show that patients who received a high Frexalimab dose in the main trial and the extension continued to have a low number of active and new or enlarging brain lesions, along with stable disability levels. Most study participants also remained relapse-free for the whole 2 years. If you're a bit of a science geek like me, I'll mention that Frexalimab is a next-generation anti-CD40L antibody. It inhibits activity in the CD40-CD40L pathway, which is a key pathway for activating immune cells in the body. Now, the important part here is that this antibody controls MS inflammation without reducing the number of white blood cells or causing blood clots, which was a serious side effect of earlier anti-CD40L inhibitors. The ongoing Phase 3 clinical trial for Frexalimab is still recruiting participants, and you can find out more by visiting SanofiStudies.com. You'll find that link in today's show notes, and we'll keep you updated as Sanofi shares additional news about Frexalimab. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is a federal agency within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that administers the Medicare program and works with state governments to, among other things, administer Medicaid. Last week, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services notified states that they would no longer provide federal matching funds for designated state health programs and designated state investment programs. These are the state programs that cover in-home non-medical expenses like a home health care aid, which allows so many Medicaid beneficiaries to remain in their homes rather than live in a nursing home. In some states, these programs support rural broadband infrastructure construction, making telehealth viable in communities where the closest neurologist may be hundreds of miles away. Specific states that will be affected by the loss of these federal matching funds include Arizona, California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, and Washington. Coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, I'll point out that all of these states, with the exception of two, are states that President Trump failed to win in the 2024 election. This withdrawal of federal funding will force these states to either cut back on their overall health spending or offset the loss of federal dollars with state dollars, which, given the economic realities that states are currently facing, is highly unlikely. About 150,000 people with MS receive some level of support from Medicaid. It's likely that this action will move some of them out of their homes and into nursing facilities. And by the way, when Congress finishes defunding enough federal programs to support those tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the United States, we'll have to see whether that Medicaid funding to support people with MS who currently live in nursing homes even still exists. This cutback in funding hits directly at the social determinants of health, targeting those who can least afford health care and whose access to care is already seriously limited. I'm committed to continuing to report on the ways that the drastic cuts in federal funding and massive federal agency staff reductions that we're witnessing in the United States will directly impact people with MS and their families. And just for the record, nothing would please me more than to have nothing new to report. At this point, all I can say is we'll all have to stay tuned. Today, there are more than 70,000 U.S. military veterans living with MS. And since 2009, the Department of Defense has played an active role in funding the MS Research Program, or MSRP. In that time, the MSRP has received a total of $153.3 million in congressional appropriations and used it to fund 208 research awards, which led to 395 publications, 102 follow-on grants, 4 patents, an additional 3 patent applications, and 13 clinical trials. Congress appropriated $20 million for the MS research program in 2025, and last month, without warning, that funding was eliminated. For people who are living with MS, for our service members, and for our veterans, the MSRP means hope for future breakthroughs in care and treatment. As an MS activist, I'm not willing to walk away from the promise that we make to our service members when they enlist. The National MS Society is committed to continuing to advocate for MSRP funding to be restored, which is why they're hosting a live Zoom webinar next week on April 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. During that webinar, you'll hear directly from MS researchers, veterans, and policy experts, and you'll have an opportunity to take action and connect with your members of Congress. Especially during these unprecedented and chaotic times, we need to show up for each other. You'll find a link to register for this webinar in today's show notes. And I hope that you not only register for this event, but you copy the link, paste it into a text or email, and forward it to at least 5 people you know. If you're already an MS activist, I know you're already on board. And if you haven't yet experienced advocating on behalf of your own interests, there isn't a better or more important time for you to get involved. People living with MS are used to living with uncertainty, and given world events, those feelings may even be amplified lately. To be honest, I don't talk with many people who aren't feeling at least a little more anxious these days. And anxiety certainly doesn't improve your MS symptoms or your quality of life. One way to manage anxiety that doesn't require another pill, injection, or infusion is through spirituality. My guest, Dr. Mana Ali Carter, joins me in a moment to discuss how spirituality can make a difference if you're living with MS. Research shows that spirituality can benefit mental health and improve your overall well-being. It can also play a meaningful role in helping people cope with life's challenges like living with MS. Today, Dr. Mana Ali Carter is joining me to discuss the positive effects that spirituality can have on the mind and body. Dr. Ali Carter is a rehabilitation psychologist at MedStar National Rehabilitation Hospital in Washington, D.C., providing psychological assessments and psychotherapy to help people cope with disabilities and improve their quality of life. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Ali Carter.
Thank you so much for having me.
I always like to begin these conversations by getting our definitions in order. So, how do you define spirituality?
Sure. Spirituality includes things that give you energy, a sense of meaning, a sense of connectedness, a sense of purpose outside of yourself, right? So something larger. These things can be practices, activities, or connections. And that probably sounds like a really ambiguous definition, but I think that's on purpose because not everyone experiences or expresses spirituality in the same way. Some people may have spiritual experiences in church, while others may have these feelings when they're spending time in nature or through art, meditation, yoga, or anything that gives them, meaning and purpose.
So that spiritual connection happens where you happen to find it.
That is a great summary. Yes.
You mentioned some people might experience that going to church. And I think when people think of spirituality, very often their mind goes to religion. Is there a difference between spirituality and religion?
Yes. I mean, they are interrelated and can be an overlap, but religious beliefs or a connection to an organized religion may or may not be central to a person's spirituality. Spirituality is more of a journey or process where religion provides a code of conduct, traditions, practices, activities, usually considered like the map, right? The map of to get through the journey. So they can be related, but they're different.
What are some ways that people do experience spirituality?
Sure. Again, spirituality is defined for the person by the person, right? It can be such a unique experience. Though some people obviously have shared spiritual preferences, people can experience spirituality through nature, right? Through different forms of art, music, painting, sculpture, through relaxation exercises like meditation or yoga. Again, this is anything that gives someone meaning and purpose, anything that connects them to something outside of their self.
When I introduced our topic, I said that spirituality can positively affect our mental health and emotional well-being. Can you talk about how that happens?
Sure. Spirituality is correlated and predictive in some research and a mediator of positive adjustment to challenges such as disability or living with multiple sclerosis. It helps with adapting to uncertainty. It helps with a sense of mastery. It helps with identity reformation. It is associated with making meaning out of challenging situations, life satisfaction. It promotes hope. I mean, it has so many positive benefits that all buffer emotional distress, such as anxiety, depression, decrease agency and decrease self-efficacy and being able to navigate hard times. So, that was very long-winded, but I think, a short and sweet, spirituality is a buffer to emotional distress. It promotes emotional well-being and mental health. It is a protective factor.
What does the research show about how spirituality can impact someone who's living with MS?
Right. So spirituality has been identified with promoting resilience and positive adjustment. And again, redefining who you are after being diagnosed with this condition. There is a lot of grief and loss when it comes to adjustment to disability. I mean, loss of function, loss of mobility, loss of privacy, loss of independence, loss of things that haven't even come into fruition yet, right? So, when you're younger, maybe before your diagnosis, you envisioned retirement to look one way. You envisioned parenthood to look one way. And now that you have to account for managing a chronic health condition, that dream or that idea no longer exists. You've lost it. And so spirituality is useful for coping and adapting to these changes once you're diagnosed with a chronic condition like multiple sclerosis. It is grounding. It helps you, again, gather a sense of resilience, move closer to your values, get reconnected to community, build confidence and self-esteem. So in specifically with people who are adjusting with MS, again, it has been shown to be a protective factor, similar to those in, as research will call it, general population.
People living with MS tend to be resilient. And resilience is the secret sauce, not only to coping with the uncertainty of life, but also to coping with the uncertainty of MS. I'm wondering, how are resilience and spirituality related?
Yeah, I think they are interrelated, right? They have a cyclical relationship that when someone can use spirituality to be a framework for cultivating resilience, right? So when you are feeling connected, when you're cultivating your spirituality, when you have hope, when you feel armored, ready for challenges and uncertainty, that promotes resilience, which is your sense of your ability to adapt to change and bounce back from illness and hardship, right? That spirituality can get you to a sense of resilience. And once you're feeling resilience, once you have data of your resilience, that allows you to pour back into your spirituality. It reinforces your spirituality as a protective factor and a tool for navigating uncertainty. And I always say, there are three phases of life, right? And for sure, when you're coping or living with multiple sclerosis, you're either headed into a stressor or a challenge, you just got out of a stressor or a challenge, or you're in one. So you are in one of those three phases, pick, right? At any given time.
True.
And so having a sense of resilience, it doesn't eliminate uncertainty. Spirituality doesn't eliminate uncertainty. Like you said, it makes you prepared and allows you to believe that you can navigate it. So it's not about eliminating it, it's about navigating it. And both of those work together to help you navigate it.
So how can someone go about starting to incorporate spirituality into their life?
Yeah, that's a big question. I joke because psychology, there's no one answer ever, right? When you think about, learning math, if you were in school, you go to your textbook, there's one right answer. 1 + 1 = 2. Psychology, there's no one fits all approach. And so if it's going to be different for different people, I will say that the ingredients to cultivating spirituality or coming up with a plan to incorporate spirituality is openness, is curiosity, is managing expectations for trial and error, right? Because spirituality can look so many different ways. You might try one thing and say, "Oh, this isn't a good fit. I don't have this visceral feeling. Maybe this isn't my thing. Maybe this isn't the thing or one of many things." So I think it's important to have a posture of openness. I think that learning about yourself is important when you're starting your journey into spirituality, what your values are, what your resources, abilities, strengths, biases, interests, desires are. Like all of those are going to lead you to building a plan and building habit and building interest into your spirituality plan. Um, you can find community to do this, right? Being around diverse people, learning from people, learning with people, that type of exposure and openness to experience and knowledge is also helpful. Now, these sound like broad strokes. Some people can go about things that way. Some people need a script, right? So whatever it is for you, like if you're someone who needs more structure, I think it's okay to have a plan to start incorporating spirituality. Everyone's plan is going to look different, but that might mean being intentional and setting aside time every week to work on this. So Sunday from 3 to 4, I'm going to do some reflection. I'm going to do a values inventory. I'm going to practice meditation. You can be more calculated about trying to begin incorporating this into your routine, but there's no right answer. Hopefully that, out of my long-winded answer, folks are finding bits and pieces that might make sense for them.
I have a two-part question, but if I can
Sure.
borrow one of the terms I've heard you use, the
Mhm.
questions are interrelated. I'm hoping you'll explain what forest bathing is, and then talk about what something called attention restoration theory is and how it can help improve cognition.
Well, I think it was okay for you to collapse them because both of them are about restoration. It's about preserving your resources, resetting your resources so you can have access to a full quality of life. So, forest bathing is immersing yourself in nature to improve your health and well-being. We know that nature has tons of benefits and therapeutic effects that when you can go into nature and mindfully ground yourself, so using all the senses that you have access to really be in that experience, that has benefits for so many bodily systems. So your immune system, your cardiovascular system, your respiratory system. It helps reduce depressive and anxiety symptoms, right? By increasing your relaxation response. That being in nature helps cultivate awe. We also know that there are benefits such as vitamin D, right, from the sun, getting a little bit of sunlight, right, helps with sleep regulation and cognition and energy and mood. And obviously, anyone living with MS wants to make a plan for immersing themselves in nature with safety in mind, right? Thinking about temperatures, thinking about safe spaces. So just make sure if this is something that you're open or interested in, that you are taking into account those things that are relevant for you that will make sure the space is safe for your mind and body. And so, similarly, attention restoration theory helps reset cognition. When you have multiple sclerosis, you can experience cognitive problems, mental fatigue. The mind is always wandering. The psyche is always going. There's a lot of planning and decision fatigue when managing chronic health conditions. And so this just means like giving the mind a break, right? Spending time in nature allows you to improve your cognitive resources, right? Fill up your cognitive tank by directing your attention to something that might be relaxing, that might not be stressful. Taking mental breaks are a big part of this. If your mind tends to wander, and I like to say all the hurts hurt together, right? So when you're tired, your cognition is going to be worse. Your mood's going to be worse. Your pain is going to be worse. So the idea of resetting will help all of those. So think about either of these, and there's so many other there's so many other different ways to restore. But the point is that rest is important, giving yourself a break, and that has benefits across the person holistically.
An important aspect of a spiritual journey is connecting with your true self. How does someone go about determining what they value and begin to understand their true self?
Sure. Self-reflection is so important. I think it's underrated and underutilized tool, but being still and thinking about yourself deeply, thinking about your thoughts, thinking about how you arrived at those thoughts, that type of reflection is important. There's tools that can help you do this. There is area within psychology called positive psychology, which is focused on strengths, abilities, helping cultivate and generate a sense of fortitude and resilience, all the positive things, right? All the mushy gushy emotions that we want that make us feel good and contribute to our quality of life. If you Google positive psychology, you'll see tons of resources and writings and inventories related to figuring out who you are. Even things you'll see some support about authenticity, right? That authenticity is associated with happiness and quality of life. When I meet patients and they talk to me, people come to see a psychologist. I want to feel good. I want to be happy. And I say, well, what does happiness even mean? And people are kind of stuck. Like, I don't know. It just sounds good. I want to be happy. They haven't quite thought about them. And so I usually like to redirect them to wanting to be authentic versus wanting to be happy. Because I think that happiness is a residual effect of being authentic, being true to yourself, true to your values. I think being authentic organically attracts opportunities, people's feelings and thoughts that may reduce some of the critical thinking or sense of rejection that we may experience.
The stress associated with living with the uncertainty of MS, uncertainty about the future, daily tasks that can sometimes feel overwhelming, all of that can leave an MS care partner feeling emotionally, physically, and spiritually drained. How might spirituality help care partners?
First, I want to normalize being tired. A lot of care partners feel guilty or, about being exhausted, about things feeling hard. And I think that's normal. I think that's a normal part of the process. And it is hard work. I think the thing that to remember is that the presence of it being hard doesn't mean that you aren't doing a good job as a care partner. The taking care of yourself also doesn't mean that you aren't doing a good job as a care partner. So I just wanted to say that out loud. We do know, in specifically care partners and caregiving within multiple sclerosis, that religious and spiritual beliefs have been associated with life satisfaction, have been associated with meaning making, right? Meaning making is finding purpose and bringing understanding to your situation, experiences, and challenges. It has helped with adjustment to challenges. Spirituality can also be a pathway to building community, right? Building community to help you on your journey as a care partner. So, the spirituality, the benefits, I think, span across all people. Like we see this with people who are living with MS, people without MS, care partners. Like we just know that it is protective and helpful.
Well, Dr. Amana Ali Carter, I want to thank you for all you do to improve the mental health and emotional well-being of people who were affected by MS. And thanks for talking with me today.
Thank you for talking with me. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for your important work and commitment to this area.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society. And you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/399. You'll find that link in today's show notes so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or a text. And if you have a minute, I hope you'll visit the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Real Talk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet. It's the best way for us to stay connected. The app will automatically download the latest episode of Real Talk MS. You'll be able to access any of our past episodes. You'll be able to save your favorite episodes. And it's a great way for me to share bonus content with you. The app is free, so I hope you'll download it today. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.